David had once lived what he thought was an ordinary life. He worked as a manager at a small publishing firm in the city. He had a cozy apartment, a modest savings account, and plans for the future that seemed secure. Yet, life has a way of slipping through the fingers, no matter how tightly one grips it. It all began with the company downsizing. It was a sudden blow. His department was cut, and with it his job of nearly 20 years. He hadn't seen it coming, and in the shock of the moment, he reassured himself that with his experience, finding a new job wouldn't be difficult. He applied to countless positions, waiting patiently for interviews that never came. Weeks turned into months, and the rejection letters piled up, each one chipping away at his confidence. His savings began to dwindle. Rent was due every month, bills stacked high on the kitchen counter, and his pride stopped him from reaching out to friends for help. He told himself this was just a rough patch, a phase that would pass if he could just hold on a little longer. But as time passed, the cracks in his life grew wider. David sold off things he once thought essential: his car, his television, his collection of books. With each item that left his hands, the walls of his once cozy apartment felt like they were closing in. Eventually he couldn't afford rent, and eviction became the inevitable final blow. With a duffel bag of clothes and a few personal items, he walked out of his apartment for the last time, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his shoulders. The first night on the streets was terrifying. He found a bench in the corner of a park, trying to blend into the shadows, hoping no one would notice him. The cold bit through his thin jacket, and the reality of his situation started to sink in. He was homeless. There was no going back to his old life. His days blurred into nights as David navigated his new existence. He learned quickly which shelters were safe and when to show up to claim a bed. Some days he would stand in line at the soup kitchen, the taste of humility stronger than the food. His pride, once unshakable, was now threadbare like the clothes he wore. He avoided eye contact with the people who passed him on the street, ashamed that he had become invisible to the world he once belonged to. There were moments of kindness. An old woman who would hand him a sandwich every morning, or a fellow homeless man named Roy, who showed him the unspoken rules of survival on the streets. But there were also moments of despair. The cold winters, the loneliness that wrapped around him tighter than any blanket, and the constant reminder that he had no safety net left. He often thought of his old life, wondering where it had gone so wrong. How had he fallen so far, so fast? Months turned into years. David was no longer the man who had once walked into the office every morning with a sense of purpose. He had become a shadow, a figure sitting on the edge of society, watching life pass by. Yet, despite it all, a part of him still held on to hope, fragile though it was. One morning, as the sun warmed his face, he sat on the steps of a church, watching people go about their daily routines. A young woman paused in front of him, her eyes soft with understanding. She handed him a cup of coffee and sat down beside him, not saying a word. For a moment, David felt something he hadn't in a long time: human connection. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way back from the edge.